Hey guys, welcome back. This video is still going to be mostly still images. I haven't started taking video again, but I did make a lot of progress. All work moving forward will have video footage, so just bear with me as I'm going through these still images. I'm just going to explain what I did, along the way. So I have. Starting here, you'll see I've used some of this brown packing tape around the flange here. I'm more so just using that as a mold release for the fiberglass. So I use that tape around the flange so that the fiberglass does not stick to the MDF flange material. So here you'll see I am filling in some of these gaps. I'm starting to take out all of the screws. I'm using thickened epoxy mixed with Q-cells, and I'm starting to fill in all of those gaps and getting ready to sand the boat flush. And once you start sanding, I recommend 40 grit sandpaper. You'll see it gets really nice and smooth. You're going to have to go in and fill in all of those screw holes once all of the gaps are epoxied. Once those gaps are epoxied, then all of the foam boards will be held together, and then it's safe to take those screws out. And then you can start rounding over those corners, sanding it smooth, and really starting to shape the boat. So this is a good opportunity to set yourself up for success for fiberglassing. And here you'll see I am starting to fill in all of those screw holes. Be careful to get all those screws out, because if you miss any, then that will hold your boat down when you try to go lift it off, and that's going to be a pain in the butt. So this is important. A good thing about building your own boat is you have the ability to customize it however you'd like. These are the trim tabs that I'm using. And so here I'm laying out the trim tabs and measuring them out, and I'm actually going to do some trim tab pockets recessed in the hull, which I think is cool. So once you measure those trim tabs out and template them out, then I actually came in here and routed that section of the foam out, leaving a small amount of foam below it. So you want to be sure not to pierce all the way through if you choose to do this. And this is kind of a work in progress, and you're going to have to fit it up. You'll see that the trim tab does fit nice and flush down in there, but what I did learn is that I wasn't going to be able to fit screws in there and have them like totally flush mounted, like it's pictured. I mean, it will end up looking like that, but I did have to go in and add a whole other section below that, which you're going to see here in a second. So I did add a big recessed area in this trim tab pocket. I ended up cutting out some of the section and then gluing all of this foam in so that the trim tab hinge actually sits up into the hull of the boat, and that gives plenty of room for it to be screwed in. You'll see here the trim tab is sitting nice and flush. I started rounding over the corners of the foam, so that trim tab just sits perfectly flush and does not extrude past the hull, which is really important in case you run on the sand or anything like that. Here's a good shot right here showing it. So those pockets there will hold the trim tabs up. And you just have to shape it, to fit that trim tab perfectly. And you need to shape it a little bit bigger, honestly, since you're going to be adding some fiberglass into that area. So it's a lot of tweaking and playing around and constant work, honestly. So here's a shot of the hull. I'm getting ready to put my my lip plastic PVC board around the flange. So I've got my packing tape down, the hull's sanded, and it's ready to go. I did do a neat layer of epoxy, so I rolled the whole hull over with just neat straight up epoxy, and then I did come back and sand that again. But that neat layer of epoxy kind of helps seal it up. So here's the first shot of PVC board that I got from Home Depot. On the left, you'll see that white board material. So I screwed up from the bottom. That stuff is really flexible, and I just got a really nice, consistent gap all the way around the boat. And you'll see how I'm going to lay this out. But basically, the epoxy or the fiberglass will go down and up onto that border. So here's a shot from the front. You can make a bunch of like hash marks in it with your skill saw or something. That helps you turn really sharp radiuses and corners with this stuff. And I think I just got maybe 3" by 1" board. It's just really super flexible and easy to work with. And you'll see it going all the way around like the hull of the boat. And here's a shot of the transom area. You'll see those hash marks on the board on like the left and right. This is another good shot for those trim tab pockets. But you'll see I leave like a nice gap. This is what we're kind of like setting like a good platform for the deck to attach to. So you want to just keep like an equidistant measurement from the hull to that board all the way around, the circumference of the boat. So it's getting ready to be time for fiberglass. I went ahead and built myself a fiberglass table. I actually used MDF with a like a laminate, so it's like super easy, doesn't catch the fiberglass, and I hung the roller. So that's a 4x8 sheet, and you can roll out big pieces of fiberglass. So next you're gonna see I used where this red line is, I used Q-cells and epoxy, kind of made a putty, and I just shaped that radius from the foam going down to the packing tape. And then also on the left side, you'll see that brown line coming in. I actually used modeling clay to create the radius from the packing tape to the PVC board. And then here I'm starting to lay out my 10-ounce cloth fiberglass. You'll see I did make radiuses in all of the corners. You really, with cloth, it's really important to have good radiuses. 1/4" radius at least, probably, because this stuff does not like to take corners. If you're using epoxy on the hull, versus poly, and you can't use chop strand with epoxy because the epoxy does not dissolve the chop strand binder, and you're using like 3 layers of 10-ounce cloth. It's really important to round your corners over and to radius the inside corners of all of your foam. So you'll want to cut out all of your epoxy layers, and you want to lay them out dry and get them all perfectly cut out, and then number them with a Sharpie in the order that you lay them down, and so you know exactly what order to relay them down when you go to start glassing. You do want to keep a little extra room, let it hang over the side a little bit, because that stuff, although it does stretch and move around, you want to always have a little bit of a buffer. You'll see I do have like a overlap of about 3 inches on each layer. And then so once you create one full layer of 10-ounce cloth, and then you go to add the second layer of 10-ounce cloth, you're going to want to stair step those cloth overlaps. So you'll overlap them by about 3 inches, and then on layer 2 you will shift that whole layer in one direction, and then stair step those overlaps. Chris does a really great job on his micro Skiff forum explaining this, but that's really important for the strength of this epoxy, and of the fiberglass, and so you don't have like major seams that you have to worry about potentially coming apart later. Unfortunately, I did not get video or more pictures of us in the process of, you know, of epoxying all of this cloth, because it was just a hell of a job. It took me and my brother and a buddy, you know, a solid straight 8 hours of wetting this stuff out. You need to have tons of rollers. You need to have your grooved, you know, fiberglass rollers. You need to have multiple buckets, you know, all ready to go. And if that stuff starts kicking on you, you need to be able to move pretty fast. You know, so do one sheet at a time. You know, have your good overlaps. Measure everything as best as you possibly can. Wet it all out. And you want to make sure that, you know, you don't have, or you minimize the number of air bubbles, you know, that you have in your, you know, in your layout. And those air bubbles, unfortunately, are just kind of unavoidable, you know, but you're going to have to go back in and grind those out, what you're about to see. So all of that white cloudy stuff you see is actually just slightly thickened epoxy. We used a little bit of silica in our, you know, in the epoxy to help that cloth hold its shape and to make turns. So when we were wetting it out, we'd wet it out and then go back in and add a little bit of thickened epoxy in areas where the cloth was just kind of refusing to lay down. So you'll see some like white cloudy areas. That's not where, you know, where the cloth did not adhere to the other layers of cloth or the core material. That's just where we needed that cloth to do what we wanted it to. And a little bit of a cheat code is to add a little bit of silica powder or fumed silica. And then that makes that stuff just like super sticky, and it helps you make it do what you want. So yeah, here are some of those air bubbles. I've actually circled them with a Sharpie. You know, this is just areas where it did not bond to the foam, or there was air, you know, pockets underneath. It's really, really important that you find every single one of these. Circle them. If you think it might be an air bubble, you know, then it just is best to grind it out anyway. You know, so you'll have to take a flat disc on a grinder, probably, you know, 80 grit or something, 40 grit. Grind those things out completely. Even on the radiuses is really important, because as this stuff dries, it like tightens up, you know, so it generates heat, so it shrinks a little bit. And so even on your radiuses like that, it can just pull away. And it's just important to go in and grind these out, because you just don't want those causing problems later. They probably would be fine, you know, but realistically, you know, any sort of gap in the core material and the fiberglass is just going to be problematic later. So circle everything with a Sharpie and go in, honestly, and just start grinding and getting ready to, you know, to redo all of those. You know, one option, honestly, if the bubble is like so big, you might actually be able to drill a small hole in it and then fill it with a syringe with thickened epoxy. So if you can get away with that, awesome. I was able to do that on a couple of them, you know, and so there was no void, and it was just like super strong, thick, solid, you know, thickened epoxy. But on a lot of them, unfortunately, most of them I had to grind out and just relay. So here's a good shot of what those bubbles actually look like. They're just kind of like white areas. You should be able to tell the difference between where your filling epoxy was and where you just don't have good bond. You'll just see it'll be evident where the epoxy just didn't stick to the hull. So you'll see I went in and circled every one of these. They all have to get ground out. That's along the keel, which is a big part of the area that might have bubbles. Grind them all out, feather them all out, and then you start laying your pieces. So you want to start small, and lay your small piece in, then a larger piece, and then a larger piece. You want to get at minimum, 3 layers back onto this. And with your feathered out edges, they should also be overlapped. and get a really good wet out on this, so it's just really solid. And then you can come back and sand these down flush, like you can see, that's going on here. And then you're gonna want to sand down the entire boat so that your fairing can stick to it. I really recommend just like about either really light sanding with like 40 grit. Don't spend too much time in one area. You don't want to burn through your fiberglass layers, or 80 grit. So here you can see from like the bow moving up, I have started fairing, and this is it's a huge process. You really need to be mixing like a gallon at least of fairing compound at a time. And I'm just mixing, epoxy, laminating epoxy with Q cells, microspheres, and I'm getting it thick on there. You want to keep adding your Q cells until it's like the thickness of like cake icing, and then you just will spread that out all over the boat. Use like trowels and spreaders, and get it really thick, and gives you something to work with. And so you're realistically, your next steps are just going to be tons and tons of sanding. Yeah, so here's another shot, of my flange area. I filled that whole bottom area with a little bit looser epoxy, which actually like naturally levels out in there, and it makes it it'll make it a lot easier down the road just sanding that, if you can pour it in loose. And then once you're all covered up in fairing, it's just time to cure. And it was starting to get a little bit cold, and so I added some heat lamps. My neighbors probably thought I had a cash crop going on in my backyard. Who knows what helicopters thought, but it is just a boat curing in there. And so all that fairing is curing, and then I'm starting just the sanding, fairing, endless purgatory cycle that I'm still in right now. And so yeah, keep a lookout for more videos, man. I'm gonna start recording some more videos, and I'll be going step by step along the way. I've come a long way on my console, and so that's probably realistically going to be up next. The console was just easy for me to go ahead and get started in the garage, and because my boat building shed is right outside of mine and my wife's bedroom, and so sanding at night, since it's getting dark so much earlier, is kind of keeping everybody up. And so my sanding is about to commence outside, but my console is making really great progress. But thank y'all for your support. Like and share, and comment, all that kind of good stuff. And if you have any questions, seriously, just reach out to me or drop a comment. I'm happy to answer. So cheers, guys.